Donald Trump gave a rally this weekend in his race for the presidency in Ohio. He took to the stage and he talked about the EV push from Joe Biden. There's expected to be news this week where there's new regulations pushing the car industry further towards electrical vehicles. Part of that push, which doesn't seem to coordinate with any consumer demand, would have a devastating effect on the American auto industry, so says Donald Trump. And when he took to that stage, he described the future. He described the auto industry and what it would look like under Joe Biden. Listen.
Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. No, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
It'll be a bloodbath for the auto industry. It'll be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. He's talking there about Chinese imports built in Mexico and the effect on the auto industry. I've had similar recent conversations with car dealerships and owners of car dealerships about the effect of the electrical vehicle push on what it would do to the auto industry. Either way, whether or not it's Chinese imports or the push for EVs, you are potentially looking at a bloodbath for the American auto industry. But that clip was clipped out of context. It has been splashed across the internet, starting on Sunday and bleeding into this morning on Monday. That clip has been turned into the following headlines. Take a look at this from news sources from NBC to Rolling Stone. Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he loses the election. CBS News, in Ohio rally, Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he loses the election. Rolling Stone, Trump says there will be a bloodbath and elections will not happen if he loses in 2024. CNN, Trump warns of bloodbath for the auto industry and country if he loses the election. CNN at least putting in the context that it includes the auto industry. NPR, Trump says some migrants are not people and warns of bloodbath if he loses. Trump was referencing people like the murderer of Laken Riley, that they were monsters, not people. And he was talking about the auto industry when he was referencing a bloodbath. But the media immediately ran with this as though Trump was celebrating the potential and laying the groundwork for another January 6th, for political violence, that he was calling for a literal bloodbath if he loses the election. Here's a great example of what was taking place across the media, and as it merged with politics, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
He's even predicting a bloodbath. What does that mean? He's going to exact a bloodbath? There's something wrong here. How respectful I am of the American people and their goodness. But how much more do they have to see from him to understand that this isn't what our country is about?
Now, this, at first blush, is insanity. It's insanity. How can someone be this stupid? How can someone be this willfully obtuse, in the words of Shawshank Redemption? How can someone be so mistaken? But first blush is incorrect, because this is not stupidity. It's not even insanity. It is purposeful manipulation. Yes, obviously of a clip taken out of context, but purposeful manipulation of your mind. And the purposeful manipulation of your mind is to motivate you by fear to vote. Vote, vote, vote against Donald Trump. Now, I wanted to step back, as I always would like to do, and make sure that I don't straw man, but instead I steel man the argument for anyone who saw that clip and hears another January 6th. A steel man puts forth their best argument. What is it? How we can understand what they're trying to say? Is there inside of that some hidden kernel of truth? I don't intend to be Don Quixote, burning down, tilting my Lancet windmills and burning down a field of straw men. I want to take down the best version of your opponent. The best I can tell is that Trump in that speech spoke, as he often does, stream of consciousness in a bit of a non sequitur. He's talking about the auto industry and said there will be a bloodbath. And then he says that'll be the least of it. It'll be a bloodbath for our country. He is talking about, I believe, while one could say, whoa, he expanded it beyond the auto industry. He didn't limit it to the auto industry. He clearly said that'll be the least of it. He's talking about more than simply the auto industry. One could try to say, oh, he's talking about the country. And I would say to that, yes, he does expand upon the limitation of the auto industry. But I think it reads pretty clearly that he's talking about, A, the economy at large beyond the auto industry, and there would be a bloodbath, and B, the country at large, be it our culture, our economy, our inflation, our taxes, the loss of common sense, would be a bloodbath if he loses the election. I have a hard time steelmanning my way into understanding how they're saying he's asking for a bloodbath, that he's asking for insurrection, he's asking for January 6th, should he lose the election. I have a hard time understanding how they arrive at that phrase in that context, even with those non sequiturs, even with that stream of consciousness, is a call for political violence. Now, in steelmanning this argument and trying to understand them and weigh it against the potential that it's simply Trump Derangement Syndrome or willful manipulation of your mind, I have to take into account that most of the people hyperventilating and yelling about political violence are the very same people that sold me the lie about very fine people in the wake of Charlottesville, Virginia. There is a decent chance that some of you listening, and there is a greater than decent chance that anyone not listening to the Will Cain Show still today believes that Donald Trump called neo-Nazis very fine people. But in order for them to believe that, they can only exist and live in the emanations of words, the repetition of rumor. Throw a rock into a canyon and hear the echoes. They don't ever hear original source material. They hear the repetition of rumor. What did Trump say that day? And this one blows your mind when you revisit source footage. Trump said in the wake of Charlottesville that there were very fine people on both sides of that debate, talking about those that don't want to see our statues torn down. He then goes into, would you take down a statue of George Washington? In that case, remember, after Charlottesville, they were taking down statues of Robert E. Lee. He said George Washington was a slave owner. How about Thomas Jefferson? He says, how do you feel about Thomas Jefferson? In that moment, in 2017, he's actually, as is often the case, to be quite honest with Donald Trump, he's prescient. He's a fortune teller. He's looking into the future. Because here we sit today in 2024, some 7 years later, and of course they've attacked George Washington. Yes, they have gone after Thomas Jefferson. And he's asking, would you go after them? And he's recognizing there are very fine people on both sides of the debate about how to address revisiting our history, taking down statues. Then Trump says very specifically, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis. I'm not talking about white supremacists. Go back and look at the source video from that time. Look at it. He specifically says, I am not talking about neo-Nazis. I am not talking about white supremacists. He says there's very fine people in the argument to take down the statues. And then he says, but I'm not talking about the people in black. He's referencing Antifa. He's talking about the goodwill debate on both sides of this issue of how you deal with parts of our past that we've evolved morally beyond and rewriting our history. And he's accepting from that. He's complimenting both sides of the debate, calling them very fine people, and he's accepting from that Antifa and white supremacists and neo-Nazis. But that is turned into Trump calls Nazis very fine people. The opposite of what he said. How do they justify that to themselves? How do they get away with it? By clipping the very first 10 seconds. There's very fine people on both sides of this situation. Before he gets to the part where he says, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis. I'm not talking about the white supremacists. This is what the media has become so adept at. And I know that I'm media. This is what the legacy media has become so adept at. And I know that I'm legacy media. But in the end, I'm Will Cain. And I'm going to do my best to share with you the truth. I'm going to be real and be honest. That's my pledge, to be authentic. To do my best to search for the truth and be honest about my biases. I don't get dictates down from on high. I'm not told what to say. How do they get away, the media, the legacy media, with that? By clipping things out of context. They have to be not stupid, not insane, at a minimum willfully obtuse, again in the words of Shawshank Redemption, or manipulating your mind. Zoom in to the very first few words, and then lie about the greater takeaway. Zoom in to his call for a bloodbath and lie about the greater takeaway of the auto industry, the greater economy, perhaps even the country, by suggesting it's not a prediction for the state of the country, but a call for political violence. Now, how does this work into manipulating your mind? Here's how. Those headlines I read to you earlier from across the media landscape, they're then echoed. If you do a Google search on Trump and bloodbath, you'll see how big tech plays a role. The top headlines, the entirety almost of the first page, will be Trump calls for bloodbath in the wake of an election. Google represents 97% of the search market. If you want to see the truth, if you want to see full context, you have to dig, you have to work, you have to do things like listen to the Will Cain Show. Now that tech is helping formulate the minds, a mass psychosis, a mass formation psychosis, politicians pounce. They use the opportunity. We saw from Nancy Pelosi. How about this from Hawaii, from a senator from Hawaii? He immediately told the media how to report this. He tweeted the following: Brian Schatz, headline writers, don't outsmart yourself. Just do, quote, Trump promises bloodbath if he doesn't win election. That's a government official telling the media how to promote misinformation, how to write the headline. And by the way, how about an administration who has championed the fight against misinformation? They even looked to put in a board in to help, advance their goals of censorship, in advancing their goals of a mass formation psychosis, in advancing their goals of manipulating your mind. How does that work for the administration who's fought misinformation? Well, of course, to perpetuate misinformation. The Biden administration tweeted the following, the Biden campaign, and then Joe Biden himself this morning, Monday morning, tweeted, it's clear this guy wants another January 6th. He's referencing Donald Trump's speech from Ohio. He's taken the bloodbath and says it's a call for political violence. It's a call for another January 6th. And then the money line. And then the poker player puts his cards on the table and says, I'm going to play my cards face up so that you can see. He then says, after saying it's clear this guy wants another January 6th, but the American people are going to give him another resounding electoral defeat in November. Play the cards face up. Let them know exactly what you're doing. Lie. They don't care. Too many want the lie. The rest will be manipulated by headlines and Google. Lie. Bloodbath. Hoax. By the way, various Biden officials went on MSNBC and said, he's calling for a bloodbath. And in order to do that, they referenced other hoaxes that they've already perpetuated. They talk about January 6th being an insurrection. They talk about January 6th being deadly. The only person that died as a result of that day in January 6th was one of the rioters, Ashley Babbitt. It was deadly only to one of the people involved in that riot. It's not, as the hoax is perpetuated, that law enforcement officers died on January 6th as a result of the actions of January 6th. Supports your hoax with the evidence of other hoaxes. So play the cards face up. Lie. Perpetuate the hoax. Instill fear. Make you afraid. There'll be an insurrection. It's a move towards authoritarianism. It's the last election in America. We must save democracy. And then marshal your fear for your vote. Joe Biden says the American people will not allow him to do so and will give him a resounding defeat in November. That is the poker player's hand. That's the cards. brazenly lie, never let go of the hoax, double down, triple down. And that's what was done this morning on MSNBC on the show Morning Joe. Triple down. Listen.
He's talking about a bloodbath for America. It's laid out in the terms of it. And these idiots on Twitter, these idiots on cable news, these idiots on Sunday shows going, well, presidents, you know, he was talking only about the auto industry, and this is one more. It's just bullshit. Let me say that at 6:15 a.m. It's just bullshit. He knew what he was doing. We're not stupid. Americans aren't stupid. He was talking about a bloodbath.
He was talking about a literal bloodbath, says the show of Trump Derangement Syndrome. But it's not. It's not simply mistaken. It's not simply insanity. It's not simply Trump Derangement Syndrome. It's willful. It's taking it out of context. It's been done before on dozens of occasions. It's being done now, and it will be done again. Get ready for the next 7 months. They're playing their cards face up, and all of it is designed to manipulate your mind so that they can manipulate your vote. Bloodbath.